The first scene of the film takes place on a plane en route to Novosibirsk, Russia. A mother and her sleeping 7-year-old daughter, Katya, are passengers. During their flight, we can observe the plane's engine making slight adjustments. Soon thereafter, Katya discovers that her mother has left her side, just before the pilot announces an emergency landing. As the plane begins to lose control, Katya discovers a suspicious old woman mumbling incomprehensible phrases behind her. The terrified Katya passes out just as the plane's engines explode, rendering it impossible to avoid the crash. However, Katya manages to survive. She carries her squeaking leg brace across the forest alone, as she is the sole survivor of the accident. A group of reporters track down Katya to do an interview on the 20th anniversary of the historic disaster. Katya consents to the interview, accompanied by her 7-year-old daughter Diana. As she has dealt with her trauma, Katya informs the reporter that she no longer wishes to reflect on that day. Her experience with trauma has also led her to pursue a career as a psychologist. Diana then intercedes and informs the reporter that Katya may still be triggered if she hears the squeaks of a leg brace, because it reminds her of her childhood. Since her mother no longer has a fear of flying, Diana and her mother will soon fly to meet Diana's grandfather. One day, Katya and Diana board a late-night flight that appears to be nearly empty, as many passengers had altered their travel plans owing to inclement weather. Diana tells Katya as soon as they enter the plane that she would prefer to sit in the back, but Katya informs her that those are not their seats. Before takeoff, the two are introduced to Alexei, who is seated in the row opposite them. When he detects Katya's anxiety, he encourages her to relax and promises her that everything will be okay. Shortly thereafter, Katya observes a ruckus occurring several rows behind them, as an elderly woman named Galina begins having a panic attack due to her extreme fear of flying. Katya, who is a psychologist, intervenes by talking the woman out of her fright and providing her some of her anti-anxiety medication. In the first few seats of the airplane, a businessman called Nikolai asks a brooding hipster sitting across from him what he is painting. The hipster gives a cryptic response, stating that drawing helps him see, whatever that means. Katya becomes agitated upon hearing a metallic squeal from above just as the jet is set to take off. Therefore, she escapes to the restroom and takes a tablet to calm herself down, ignoring the stern stewardess's warning that she should be seated immediately. While the attendants are reviewing the safety guidelines, she hears her mother's voice and discovers that the restroom door has changed drastically. When she unlocks the door, she finds herself eerily transported back to her childhood home, until she finds a door that sends her directly back to the plane. Now stunned, Katya glances around and finds that the emergency exit is blocked, before the stern stewardess stops her and orders her to return to her seat. Alexei tries to ask Katya what's wrong, but she doesn't respond, so her daughter Diana answers the question for her. Alexei expresses his condolences after being informed by his daughter that Katya is the only survivor of a deadly plane crash. After the plane has finally taken off, Katya apologizes to Alexei for her earlier impoliteness. Alexei reveals that he has traveled to every war zone in the world to cover the news as a journalist. Later, while everyone is asleep, the plane travels through a stormy night. Then all of a sudden, the sky turns red and palm trees appear on the plane's windows. Little Katya is shown having dinner with her mother in the next scene. She asks her mother if the scar on her leg would heal soon, but her mother tells her that it may be permanent. Katya quickly discovers, to her surprise, that her mother seems deformed in the mirror. Katya asks her mother if she died in the plane disaster, which offends the mother, so she begs Katya to stop asking such a ridiculous question since it has been 3 months since the flight. While Katya's mother washes the dishes, she begins to hear the creaking of a leg brace. The mother then begins to contort her body in an odd manner. Fortunately, it was merely a dream. She and the other passengers are jolted awake by turbulence. Evgeny, the husband of Galini, suddenly falls unconscious as the turbulence continues, leading the passengers and stewardesses to rush to his rescue. Katya, who has medical training, gives them instructions on what to do. They place the man on the ground for Katya to do CPR. However, he awakens, begins to choke Katya, and says odd phrases before passing out once more. In addition to the increasing severity of the turbulence, Katya sees a dark hand reaching towards the seat behind Alexei, which causes her to freeze. Everything ceases for a moment when Evgeny takes his final breath. As if that weren't enough, the entire plane begins to shake violently, and the remaining passengers are compelled to strap themselves to their seats. The flight attendant immediately gets the additional oxygen tank and rushes to Diana, but she is flung against the ceiling and loses the extra oxygen. In the meantime, Katya loses consciousness due to a shortage of oxygen and recalls a memory of an elderly woman from a long-ago flight. When she awakens, the turbulence has ceased, and she rushes back to a terrified Diana to reassure her that she would never abandon her again. After that, she immediately tells Alexei about the old woman she saw on the aircraft 20 years ago and how she believes she is behind this because the strange words Evgeny muttered to her earlier resembled the old lady. Katya hypothesizes that the elderly woman is angry since she was the lone survivor of the accident and would wish to end her own life. Alexei, on the other hand, asserts that the man's death was entirely natural and that Katya is hallucinating due to the medicine she took. Consequently, she expresses sympathy to the bereaved Galina. When she returns to Diana, she observes her sketch of a plane in which they are seated in the rear row. However, she reiterates that those are not their seats, and they return to their row. Katya asserts once more that she heard her mother's voice before takeoff and believes she was attempting to warn her about something. In the front row, Nikolai the businessman attempts to converse with the brooding hipster once more, telling him that he has been traveling for over a week and simply wants to return to his family. He also shows him photographs of his children, but the hipster cannot stop painting a smoking portrait of the businessman. Katya is still persuaded that something is wrong, and she remarks that her leg scar has vanished despite having seen it that morning. She also comments on how unusual it is that the pilot did not inform them that a passenger had died. Alexei's head begins to ache, while Diana appears to be conversing with someone in the row behind them. It is revealed that Diana has been conversing with a girl, who has forebodingly informed Diana that Katya will leave her as soon as a man starts blazing, leaving the mother perplexed. The jet will soon land in Novosibirsk, the same city Katya and her mother were traveling to 20 years ago. Katya observes the attendant's icy demeanor and realizes, once more, that something is amiss. Shortly thereafter, it is discovered that the oxygen tank beneath the businessman's seat is leaking, while a liquid is flowing through the ceiling above him. Then, Diana informs Katya once more that the girl just told her that she will go, just as the irritated businessman pulls out his cigarette to ignite it. Katya observes this and hurries up to him. But it is too late. The man catches fire as the spilling liquid comes into contact with the lighter, and the oxygen tank beneath him just exacerbates the flames. Katya sees a face in the flames yelling at her before two stewardesses rush to extinguish the fire. The businessman is fortunately or unfortunately still alive, but severely burned. Katya rushes back to Diana as his attendants attempt to administer first aid, but ends up witnessing the mysterious figure again. One day prior to this voyage, she finds herself back in her home with her daughter, with the scar on her leg fully intact. The mother then hugs her daughter and proposes that they cancel their trip for tomorrow, to which the daughter agrees. She decides later that evening that she no longer wishes to take the pills and flushes them down the toilet. Katya then starts hearing her daughter's voice, although she is nowhere to be found. Suddenly, the home begins to shake as the girl cries at Katya for allegedly abandoning her. Galina awakens her after she is once again transferred back to the airplane. Diana approaches her and informs her that her mother just went past her without noticing her. Katya apologizes for her oversight. Alexei interrupts the mother and daughter because he needs Katya's assistance in caring for the burned guy. After observing the wretched man, she concludes that his airway must be clogged and instructs Alexei to assist him breathe by holding his head upright. Alexei asks Katya why she zoned out before, to which she responds that she believes she is beginning to hallucinate and, as a result, she mistakes her dreams for reality. Katya is annoyed by the brooding hipster across from her who is still painting while muttering strange stuff to himself. Alexei prevents her from ranting at the hipster after she loses her composure. During this, Nikolai attempts to access his mobile phone, prompting the hipster to assist him. He exhibits his wallpaper to the businessman, which depicts Nikolai smiling joyfully with his family. Nikolai takes his last breath and passes away after seeing his family's faces for the last time. Katya apologizes for lashing out at the hipster and introduces him as Pavel. Now that they've lost yet another passenger on the trip, Katya observes that Galina is not in her seat and has been in the restroom for some time. Concerned for her safety, Katya bangs on the lavatory door, irritating the stewardesses, who believe Katya is mentally ill and should return to her seat. Nevertheless, when they finally open the door, Galina is not there. In the meantime, unbeknownst to them, Evgeny's corpse opens its eyes. When Katya is about to return to her seat, Evgeny shoves her to the chairs behind her, where a number of dark hands hold her down. Katya then observes that she is oddly seated in row 19. She returns to reality and discovers Evgeny's lifeless body sitting still. She also sees the shadowy figure, which appears to be communicating with her. Then, Katya goes up to her daughter and insists that they exit the plane immediately. Alexei, observing this, tries to stop her, but immediately begins bleeding from his eye and passes out. The two flight attendants hurry up to them and attempt to prevent Katya from fleeing the aircraft. One of them then begins to vomit water till she collapses and dies. Upon observing this, Katya begins to accuse the stern flight attendant of complicity. She then approaches Pavel and steals his sketchbook. Katya now realizes that he has been painting her visions in some way. As soon as she realizes where the exit is, Pavel's body vanishes into thin air. Still, the stern stewardess and Alexei attempt to persuade Katya not to approach the pilot's cabin door. They explain that they are merely protecting her from something. And then, the stewardess is yanked away by an invisible force, as Alexei begins to bleed from the skull and eventually dies. Katya has no other option but to bust through the pilot door, but upon entering, she discovers an identical cabin to the one she just left. Without losing faith, she proceeds from one pilot door to the next, and the next, until she reaches a cabin with a radically different appearance than the previous one. Katya dashes to catch up with Diana, who is now at the end of the corridor with a mysterious person. At this moment, the film's plot takes a dramatic turn, as it is revealed that none of this was genuine, and Katya is truly still aboard the doomed plane we knew would crash 20 years ago. The elderly woman whom Katya always believed was responsible for the accident reveals that she put her to sleep because she did not want her to witness the horror of death. In addition, the images she has been experiencing are merely glimpses of a life she will never live. Katya's fate is now in her own hands, as she has repeatedly demonstrated that she does not wish to die by attempting to regain consciousness and resisting death. The narrative then returns to the past, when it is revealed that the passengers on the plane are the same individuals Katya had imagined interacting with in her future existence. Galina and Evgeny are seated a few rows behind Katya and her mother when Evgeny suffers a heart attack and Katya's mother rushes to his rescue. Little Katya returns to her hallucination one last time to say goodbye to her imaginary daughter Diana, who encourages her to simply pay heed to the small clues she has been given throughout her hallucination in order to save herself. When young Katya finally awakens, the scene of the plane accident at the opening of the film is revisited. Little Katya manages to reach her mother by crawling toward the back seats of the vehicle. In this horrifying situation, Katya also observes the deaths of the other passengers. Alexei then picks her up and assists them in fastening their seatbelts, but is tragically killed by the explosion. The film concludes with both characters seated in row 19 of the plane, having survived the disaster and being the only survivors. Subscribe for similar content, enable notifications, and like the video to help the channel. Thank you for watching.